Going on, y'all? It's me, Michael, here for you. I wanted to do a little what I've been reading episode. We've been talking about our sketchbooks lately, and I've just been going back through some good stuff here. But first, I would be remiss not to give a shout out. Rest in peace to David Lynch, a huge influence, a huge source of inspiration for both Nick and I. He comes up in our conversations all the time. Just a unique, creative voice, idiosyncratic, inimitable, really hard to talk about without, going into huge superlatives or anything. But if you're interested, I highly recommend this book, Room to Dream. I'm not a big memoir guy in general, but this book is great. It's written by Christine McKenna, who did a bunch of research and interviews and kind of went through each phase of Lynch's life and talked about all the movies. And so each section is dedicated to a movie. And so she writes basically a biography, and then immediately after that section, Lynch himself kind of responds to that section. So he gets to kind of clarify and embellish or say, I don't remember this happening at all, et cetera, et cetera. But it makes for a great read, and if you're a movie fan or just a fan of artists in general, it doesn't really get much better than him. I'm just also an enormous fan of his work specifically. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes people who make, surrealist art kind of get lumped into this group of silliness or something. I think sometimes people laugh off David Lynch movies as being random or ridiculous or something, but I really feel like his work is profound in a way that very few people's work is, and if you're willing to engage with it on a psychological level, it's kind of just endlessly rewarding in that sense. Not that it isn't funny. I think Lynch is hilarious, and his movies and his artwork in general is full of a rich sense of humor, but I don't think it's anything to be laughed off as being goofy. I find it just deeply moving and disturbing in all the special right ways. So anyway, if you don't know who I'm talking about, do yourself a favor, go watch some David Lynch movies. Rest in peace to the G. That was a rough one. All right. So I'm a really big fan of Dave Lapham's Stray Bullets. David Lapham and his wife Maria Lapham, they make these books together. I don't know enough about the process to know how involved she is, but I think it's pretty serious. I think they maybe kind of write these together, or they write the story arcs together or something. I'm not sure, but it's a collaborative process for sure. I've seen other people, comics folks talk about the original run, which goes from 1 to 41, 42. Am I missing one? I might be missing an issue, actually. They're basically crime comics. They're if you haven't read them, they're crime comics full of violence and humor and all sorts of things. And I guess not too far removed from a David Lynch film. I kind of think the word Lynchian is bullshit. Nothing is a David Lynch movie, and that comparison is lazy. So all you critics out there, step your game up. But this is not surreal. It's kind of rooted in realism, which is part of what makes it so fun. I think the violence in these books is sometimes extreme, but never gratuitous. And one of the things I love so much about the whole run is it's always rooted. All these stories are kind of rooted in the human angle. I think Dave Lapham is really interested in the people who get involved in violent situations. This is it's not a gore fest, and it's not meant to titillate or celebrate gun culture or anything. It wouldn't be valuable if that was the case. But I think it's really interested in the circumstances that create violence and the types of people who end up participating in violence, whether it's willingly or through inertia or coercion or something like that. And I think that's what really makes this stand apart in a world of other crime comics and crimes full of violence. Neither Nick nor I are violence fans. We don't celebrate real life violence, but boy do I love violent art and comics and cinema, and music and all kinds of things. Anyway, this is the original run. This started, you know what? Let's look it up. When did this run start? This is the first issue of the whole thing. This was printed in March of 1995. And it's all these issues are black and white. So inspiration for me, for sure, because I think coloring is boring for me. And I always feel like the drawing is done when it's inked and ready to roll. But straight out of the gate, I mean, the action scenes in these books are so good, and like the sound effects are so impactful, and just the way he choreographs all these scenes is really, really solid. And just the way the black moves across the page is an 8-panel grid throughout the entire run, sometimes broken up into bigger chunks, you know, so it might be, so if there's any examples in here, there might be 4 for a half page and then 4 panels below. Oh yeah, there we go. But it's an 8-panel grid, which seems like it would get old and boring, but for some reason it doesn't. And the pacing of these books is all banging straight out of the gate. Even in the first issue, like, it really just feels like he came out guns blazing. I mean, Lapham had been drawing comics for decades before this came out, but as your first kind of independent solo venture, this is pretty astonishing to me. And one of the other cool things about Stray Bullets #1 is that there's now, I think there's 42 issues of the original run. There's 8 issues of this middle thing, Killers, which we'll get to in a second. And then there's another 42 issues of this other thing called Sunshine and Roses, which actually takes place before the first run, I think. I haven't actually finished this one yet. But the most recent issue, chronologically, after, what is that, 84, 90, after about 90-something issues, the most recent thing to happen in the Stray Bullets universe is the very first issue. So you get the end of the story first, unless he goes back to it at some point, and then you get to kind of see how they got there from there. But even that, there's a lot of ambiguity in this. It's not like, the first issue is not a spoiler by any means. It's just, it's an incredible introduction to what ends up being a really rich and rewarding story. But anyway, people have talked about Stray Bullets before. I highly recommend checking this out. I think there's 42 issues. I might be missing one. And then there's at least one of these Amy Racecar color specials. And I don't want to spoil anything or whatever, but if you once you get into it, you'll realize who Amy Racecar is. That's definitely a more sort of absurdist side road of the Stray Bullets world. So I picked this up because Stray Bullets came up in our comics club. I think we've mentioned the comic club that Nick and I are in on Mondays, where we read comics as a group and we talk about them on Discord online. And we talk about maybe reading Stray Bullets. And so I was just looking through my collection, and I was like, hey, I haven't read these other ones. And once I started reading them again, I was like, man, I don't think I've read even all the ones of these that I have. And then I only have 13 of them. The other ones are by my bed because I haven't finished them yet. And then I got online and I was like, holy shit, there's 42 issues of this Sunshine and Roses thing, which I love finding out when stuff like that happens. And things that I love, there's more of it somehow. I don't know how did that happen. I guess this was coming out kind of weekly for a little while, and I was reading it. And if my memory is correct, I feel like I was reading it weekly, but then not weekly, monthly. But then, after a while, it was like, okay, it's been 3 months and I don't really remember what's going on at the beginning. And I just kind of lost track of it. And I think that this was maybe the last monthly book that I was buying. I think the most recent one I got came out in 2003 or 4 or something. I don't know. But I was thinking about how much I miss kind of Wednesday comics. There's a thread on the Bubbles message board about what they call Wednesday comics, which is stuff that comes out monthly, and you kind of you go to the comic shop every Wednesday and you're like, which stories are continuing this week? And while I do kind of miss that process, and I definitely miss kind of going to the shop and talking to people who work there, and sometimes you talk to people who work there who are also reading the same thing, and you're speculating about it, and I really miss that part of it. I guess what I don't miss, though, is what I just described, which is by the 15th issue, you're like, what the fuck's going on here? It's been months since I read this first one, and now I gotta go back and read them all again. And I like that stuff, but I don't know. I understand why this is not the preferred format anymore, really. But I think he kept a pretty good schedule as far as putting these out monthly. I mean, as a one-person job, however Maria is involved, he's doing all the drawing and all the lettering and all the inking. And that's pretty amazing. So there's Stray Bullets, the original run, and then chronologically, it goes back in time. So it goes back in between some of the earlier issues and does this Killers run, which is eight issues, and then it goes on to this Sunshine and Roses run. So I think Killers is the first thing chronologically, and then Sunshine and Roses, and then the original run. But that also jumps back in time a little bit from there. But I wanted to talk about this because I've heard people talk about the original run. I've never heard a single person talk about Stray Bullets Killers or Stray Bullets Sunshine and Roses. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I don't know anybody who's read these. And I mean, as you can tell, I have very little experience with these as well. And I've just been having the greatest time reading these. I love the way Lapham handles dialogue. I think he's a great writer. There's definitely a lazier version of this kind of writing, which is like, I don't know, it sounds like there's a lazy way to do this where it sounds like you're making fun of these people and you're making fun of the characters. You know, there's gangsters and there's strippers, and some of it seems sort of stock on the surface, but I think it's really, the richness really comes from the interactions of the characters and how dense the web of all these characters is. And I'm really excited actually now that I'm reading these. Once I have collected them all and I've finished the Sunshine Roses thing, I'm just going to start the original run again, because that's the chronology, and it's been a while since I read those too, and I think they sort of will inform each other in really interesting ways. Yeah, I mean, there's relationships in here. There are kids, like all the kid relationships feel really real, like the way kids who are friends with each other also kind of fuck with each other and bully each other and get into fights. Then they become friends again later, and there is a kind of a through line of like violence that happens to young people and how that impacts them later on, but not in a contrived or didactic way. Like it's much more subtle than that. I think a lot of this book is not particularly subtle, but I think there's a lot of subtlety kind of running under the surface in a lot of these issues. And I just think the characters are so fun. I mean, they're all really well drawn technically, like on the page, but they're also really well. They're all really thorough, and they're all really distinct. And I'm kind of constantly dazzled by how, number one, how unique each of the characters is. You know, with a cast this big, I think a lot of artists, maybe myself included, tend to be like, okay, I've got a lot of characters now. I need a new character. He's going to be different because his hair is different, or he's going to be different because he has a mustache or something like that. And I think all of these characters are distinct from one another, but also without being cartoonishly so. But and that really makes them all feel like real people to me. He draws a great car. All the action sequences in these things are really incredible. You know, like there is violence in this. So if you're shy on violence, I don't know. It's, again, I don't find it gratuitous myself, but I've also never experienced physical violence. So if that's not your bag, it's totally fine. I guess that's like a trigger warning or something. But I wouldn't describe this as a violent book. It has violence in it, I guess, in the way that like a Tarantino movie does. But it is really just sort of rooted in these characters. He does a lot of amazing background work. The way he draws spaces is really inspiring to me, especially if, you know, when I draw backgrounds, like a lot of artists, the background's kind of like an afterthought. Like especially because I'm really interested in body language, and I think it seems to me that Dave Lapham's really interested in body language too. I mean, even just like the way this guy's kind of sitting down in the car next to his girlfriend in the back seat, like, and to have him sort of lower in this panel, like there's so much consideration to the posture, and the sort of acting, I guess, for lack of a better word, is all really, really compelling without feeling stagey or stiff. Like I would never in a million years think that he uses any kind of photo reference for this, or if he does, he's not copying the photo, he's just kind of looking at it to get kind of a loose idea. Like, it doesn't feel stiff in any kind of photo referencey way, but still manages to feel realistic in a way that I just think is like kind of an unbelievable artistic accomplishment, to draw with this level of consistency and clarity while still feeling like cartooning. And it's, you know, it's expressive in so many ways. And just, I mean, look at these like interiors are so great. Like when I draw a background of a house, something I really want to do, especially after rereading some of this stuff, is actually like look at more kind of architectural reference, look at more furniture, look at more rooms. I just think that I don't know if he uses photos for these kinds of things, but just like this sort of backyard is not like, it's not the stock cartoonist backyard. Like if I was drawing a backyard, these sorts of details wouldn't necessarily occur to me. So they're either pulling from a rich personal reference, or he's really doing the extra work to research what's going on in there. I'm gonna try to skip some of these end pages because they're kind of spoilery. I mean, a lot of this takes place in Baltimore, so obviously I'm drawn to that as well. As a Marylander who spent a lot of time in Baltimore, this is near and dear to my heart. But you don't have to know anything about Baltimore or care about Baltimore or care about the story. But just look at this, like this living room, I think is great. It's a perfect angle. Like her pose sitting on the couch is awesome. The cross on the wall, the curtains, even just the little shape of the picture here. Like these details are amazing to me. And either he's just a tremendously observant person, or he's doing that extra work to find those things. I don't know. I kind of don't want to know because it just feels like magic to me. Like every page here feels cinematic and like comics at the same time. Yeah, so I don't know. I highly recommend this. If you're someone who's read the original Stray Bullets run, like the first 42 issues or however many there are, I can't recommend highly enough reading this Killers arc. So these are the Killers arc is collected in one book, I think. This is 8 issues. This is the whole thing. Sunshine and Roses has been collected, I think, up through issue 30-something. But there's at least 10 issues of Sunshine and Roses that has not been collected by Image, and I don't know why. No one online seems to know why. But hey, if you're listening or if you're watching, publish that shit. I want to read the end of this book. It's awesome. Cannot recommend this book highly enough. I think it's great. I would like to look through more of these, but I don't really want to spoil anything for anyone who's digging into this for the first time. But if you're interested, I give it my top-notch recommendation. Crime comics rooted in what feels like real people in a compelling and not manipulative way. So I recommend it. Check it out. Maybe we'll talk more about this after I finish the whole thing, or if Nick has a chance to read it. I don't think he's read it yet. But yeah, great stuff. So thanks Dave Lapham. Thanks Dave. Oh, 2 Davids. Thanks David Lynch for everything you've done. We will all miss you. Toodles.